Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our to another lecture from our 21st Encontro de Férias. Uh, I'm going to let you know before I introduce our next presenter. The certificates. It's going to the link for the certificates. I'm sorry. It's going to be available here on the video description during the lecture. Okay, so keep online until the end so you can get the certificate, right? And right now we're going to start with Alex Tamulis talking about words create worlds, how ideas create the grammar you indulge in. Please welcome Alex.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Jack. I'm super excited to meet you, to be able to share some ideas with you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much. And here we go. Well, today we're going to talk about ideas. We're going to explore, um, you know, how we think and how we use language in order to convey our ideas and the power behind it. All right. So the first slide there, you have some icons of thought and the idea and how it creates worlds. So that's my premise. I'm telling you that words create worlds. So what do I mean by that? Right? That's the important thing. But before that, I'm assuming that y'all are English teachers, right? That you love language. So we're going to discuss, like, quickly, the verb to be. Why? Well, because it is one of the main instruments, one of the main actors of our lives, right? I mean, we've many times in our lives, we've worked, we've exposed, we've taught, we've done so many things with this verb. So it is a class favorite. It's one of the main actors. So to be or not to be, just to quote Shakespeare for a little bit here, and I want to know something about it. I have a quick question. Have you ever wondered why the verb to be looks the way it does? So when we look at the verb to be, when we analyze it, we notice that it is weird in terms of being irregular, right? It's not a regular verb, obviously, but it is used regularly, right? It is used every day. It's one of the most used verbs in the language. And then when we think about the origins, they are a bit hazy, right? We don't really know. But the question is, we use it all the time, but we rarely think about how it came to be, right? Pun intended. So I just wanted to know, let's see if you have some comments there. Uh, yeah, so you're just saying hi, afternoon, hello. So basically, you all use the verb to be. And it's rare for you to think about why it looks the way it does. So this presentation is an exercise on those things. All right. So we're gonna discuss that. So let me show you another question here. What are the origins of this super famous verb? Okay, I'm gonna share my thoughts with you. So looking at the verb, we have the infinitive there, to be. We have various forms there, be, am, are. The past forms was and were. So like I said, it's really irregular. And we can analyze all these aspects. But like I said, we're gonna get there. So I'm just trying to tease you into thinking about your main instrument. So it's like, if you play an instrument or if you play a game, it's thinking about the game itself. It's thinking about the aspects that build the structure of the game. So we can think about these aspects, or we can think about grammar, because I pose this hypothesis that ideas create the grammar you indulge in, right? So we can analyze verbs, auxiliaries, articles, prepositions, you name it. And they're all part of this English that we call the standard English, right? Yes, stay tuned. I'm going to talk about it, but we're going to wait till the end because I want you to stick around, all right? So please don't go away. Stay tuned for more. And when we reach the end of the presentation, we're going to discuss the verb to be, and you're going to learn, or at least we're going to try to unveil, what the verb to be is all about. Anyhow, arrête, stop. There's a catch. And where is the catch? The catch, whenever we study anything, we can only go back in time. How many years can we go back in time? Only the registered files, documents, books, right? And with language, it's much more complicated than that. So the exercise here is to see the limitations that we have when we think about language. Because like I said, I'm thinking I'm a language teacher. Therefore, I need to think about language itself, right? Because this is the main instrument that I work with. But I rely on written records, and I rely on accounts, reports, either by scientists or by other humans. So there's a catch because we have to go back in time, right? But the problem with written records is that written records belong to people who have access to those records. And the further back you go, back in time, those written records belonged to few people, right? Those records belong to the powers that be, to authority. So we only have the register based on a small perspective, and that's totally okay. I'm not really here to criticize or do anything about it. I'm just saying that it is the way it is. When we go back in time, we check the records, and they are perspectival, they are partial, they are relative to whoever controlled writing back then, script. All right. So basically, I get to the main premise of my talk, and it might be controversial to some people. That's okay. Someone needs to talk about it, which is the fact that language is always perspectival, is always relative to whoever is looking at it, right? It's a subjective experience. So my talk today will be to try to debunk whatever standard form of any language, could be Portuguese, English, as the best variety. All right. By showing that all varieties share the same abstract structure. So when we think about whatever variety, it doesn't matter. I mean, the structure itself is there. And it's not really a matter of being better. It's a matter of choice. Okay, so standard forms of the language are not inherently superior. And like I said, you might disagree, you might agree, or you might have no opinion so far. You might be considering and thinking about it, which is totally okay. It's just the main premise of this talk, because I've been thinking about it for many years, and I don't really have many opportunities to talk about it. I decided that today was the day to really get my thoughts out there about this topic. So when we use the word language in English, we have a problem, because in French, you could say langage and langue, or in Portuguese, you could say linguagem, língua, but in English, you don't have that dichotomy. Well, you do have the dichotomy, but you use the same word. So you use like homophones, but then you would have like language version 1, language version 2. So I put it there, the faculty of language, the brain power. So when I use the word language, I got to be careful, because I might be talking about the processing power, which is related to thinking, and I might be talking about langue, about the language, which we call it English, French, whatever, Portuguese, and so on and so forth. So to give you more about my point here is basically that whenever I talk about language in terms of linguagem, in terms of langage, I'm talking about DNA, brain, and thought. So if you have a brain, if you think, you have a genetic power to use this software, which is language via thought, okay? But the thought comes before the language. Whenever we think about a chimpanzee, for example, the chimp is, if the chimp is using a stick to kill or to grab more termites, the chimp is using technology, to help, to aid with that task, right? And the chimp doesn't have language the way we do. So the chimp is thinking and is analyzing the outcome whenever he gets the stick, but he's not using language. So thought comes before language, right? So consciousness is something that's just genetically there. And then our brains have an organic capacity. It's a limited organic capacity, but it is amazing. You know, the brain capacity that we have, it's the most complex organ made out of carbon in the universe so far as we know it. So that part of language is granted, you know, it's what Chomsky calls the genetic endowment. So you've been gifted with that. So you don't have to worry about that. That's the brain processing. Well, you can worry about that, but it's much harder to get there. Anyhow, so and that is related to the word acquisition in a way. So when you hear sounds, you know, when you hear cognitive information, you process that naturally in a way because of your genetics, because you're human. With the other one, language, the other definition, language, subscript there in O2, definition 2, you have government language or cultural language or societal, right? Social language, whatever you want to call it, tribal language, communal, community, collective. And that's mostly related to learning, because that you cannot really link that to natural processes. You have to really consciously look at those things. You know, nobody will be like, hey, you know, I was just listening to the list of government rules and all of a sudden I picked them up and it's all, no, you have to consciously put the effort to do that. Okay. But then we have a problem, right? Because we're trying to analyze language. And like I said, you know, we have to use written documents. But then language has been around for roughly 1,000,000 years. We don't really know exactly, but at least 150,000 years. And all those things that I'm placing there, like I said, you know, this is mostly a talk to teachers. It's not really about the student now. It's about you as a teacher thinking about language, thinking about the cognitive process that language is. And we've done all those things. We've done domestication of fire, that's technology. We've invented the bow and arrow. How long ago did roughly archaeologists say that it was roughly 80,000 years ago that the bow and arrow was invented? What about art, right? Cave paintings. They say roughly 70,000, 65,000 years ago. What about the first musical instrument? They say 40,000, 45,000 years ago. So these things, they required brain processing, thought, and cognitive information. But they didn't have any writing, okay? They didn't have writing. Writing only came to be roughly 5,000 years ago. So it's a very recent invention, development, abstraction, whatever you call it. But I pose that writing isn't language itself. And I'm proving, because we've been using language for thousands of years, probably 1,000,000 years. And language was just fine before writing came about. So it is not the fact that we have to rely so much on writing as the main thing, because writing is a mapping process. And writing tries to map with the English language, with standard English, 44 sounds with 26 letters. It's not going to be a perfect system. You're going to have to find ways to cut corners, to use 2 letters here, to use the same combination there. It's just the way it is. You know, it's limited. And by doing so, a lot of problems, you generate a lot of problems, which is fine. But it's just the fact that you have to understand that language is much older. Spoken language in the faculty of language plus communication, all right? And then writing came about. And when writing happened, when writing took place, then we have the birth of records, the birth of the stuff that doesn't die, the birth of the ideas that stay for many generations to come. And then you have the birth of prestigious stuff. That's a fancy word. And I put the word trivium there, which is like grammar, logic, and rhetoric, you know, fancy word that Aristotle and Plato used to describe grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And I placed the Greek words there, grammatiki, logiki, and rhetoriki. So grammar, logic, rhetoric. This was the education back when Aristotle and Plato were around. Okay. And that's really famous. I love Plato and Aristotle. I love thinking about ideas and everything. But this comes to try and systematize something that's been going on for thousands of years. Okay. So it's not going to be a perfect system. All right. It's going to try to apprehend whatever it can. All right. But either way, regardless of whatever processes are happening, we are trying to materialize or to convey the idea, which is related to thinking, visualizing, you name it, right? And then just put it on record. But why does it matter to you? The thing is, you're like, oh my God, this is a very philosophical talk, man. You're way over. No, it's not about that. It's just, why does it matter to me as a teacher, as someone who uses language? Well, it matters because you take responsibility, right? You are promoting language to many people. You are promoting ideas. Okay. So you should think about it. And this is the way that I thought about it, with the aid of a couple of friends, like Ringo Starr says, with a little help of my friends, friends Foucault and Chomsky here. We're going to talk about it quickly. But whenever you have an idea, you need to promote the idea, right? So we call it the ideology. So the storytelling. So that's the power of the storytelling. And this storytelling is going to be so powerful that it will be amplified and it will be reinforced via government, via institutions. Hey, and I'm not saying that this is bad, okay? I'm saying that this is just the way it is. And it can be beautiful, actually. This can be super powerful and in a positive way. Don't take me wrong, all right? Anyhow, it can be really cool, but it can be really bad, as when we look at history. But anyhow, this amplification of the ideas that are told via storytelling and that are fossilized, or at least consolidated better, via government and institutions, this generates forms of control, controlling people's thoughts, controlling people's ideas. And you have two different types of control that we're going to check. But my main concern here is nothing related to that stuff. It's the stuff that comes after the outcome, because the outcome becomes, in my opinion, bias and linguistic prejudice, in my opinion, and the opinion of other people who love languages. Languages are so powerful that they can be instruments of, unfortunately, prejudice and biases, because if you treat whatever language or variety as better because people have been telling you that they're better just because they are, all of the other ones don't look as nice or don't look as appealing. You're not going to feel like studying the other ones just because this one is the one to be, right? This one is the one for me to chase. It's like the English of the Queen. You hear it, you're like, oh my God, this is so beautiful and perfect, and it's just one more variety of any other. With the abstract structure, you cannot prove that it's better than anything. And then some people might be saying or thinking, oh, but this hinders communication. And this is not true either. It's not about communication. It is about control. It is about being able to use authority and government to make sure that the standard is applied. Because communication happens with, like I said, because you're genetically endowed, it happens in many, many layers. Various layers that you can check with pragmatics and sociolinguistics. It's not the point of this talk. But the point of this talk is, because we deal with biases and linguistic prejudice, we have to be honest with people and just show them that the one that the standard that we just pick because it's the government one, whatever. It's not any better than any other. All right. So basically, I went ahead of myself there. Where do we fit? Well, I ask you, are you a critical thinker who challenges tradition and cultural pillars? Let's face it, Probably not. You're looking at that probably there, and you're probably thinking, man, the guy wrote it. It should be probably and not probably. So your brain is unconsciously correcting things because you've been indoctrinated. If you read Paulo Freire, you've been doing that for many, many years in your life. And I'm a product of that too. And it's totally okay. All right. I cannot get out of the matrix either. All right. But at least I am thinking about it. And this should be critical thinking. Critical thinking should be the right for us to think about it, not to accept things at face value. And when we think about it, we are more empowered. And then I'm thinking about language, and I'm thinking about the structures of language, and I want to share with more people and see if I can find other people who think the same way. But anyhow, if we compare it to the Matrix, we all took the blue pill, especially with language, because we rarely think about the fact that these things apply. But I want you today to take the red one and for us to look behind the curtain. It's a stage with many actors. We're all actors, like Shakespeare likes to say. All the world's a stage. That's beautiful. But we need to talk about the play. We need to talk about the playwright, the screenplay. We need to talk about the elements, the stage, the deus ex machina, everything. So anyhow, if you think about these things, people might think you're weird, which is totally okay because it's unusual, but you have the moments to talk about it. And this is one of these moments, all right? So let me show you examples of unconscious linguistic biases. Again, you see one more there with the writing. But this is an example with Brazilian Portuguese. A lot of you speak Brazilian Portuguese, and you have the nominative case, fancy word. Eu, tu, ele, nós, vós, eles. Well, who uses vós? Come on, be honest. Nobody uses vós. Who uses nós? It's rarely used. I mean, you use a gente all the time, or it depends on the pronunciation. You might change the way you pronounce these things, but I'm just giving you examples. So you say eu, you say tu, se, ele, ela, a gente, seis. But all these things, all of a sudden, I cannot use that. And then you're going to say, well, you got to be worried about register, man, depending where you are. Well, because you've been part of this whole thing and you're not thinking that the structure is the exact same thing. It's still a pronoun. It still has the power to be used with inflectional morphemes. It still has the power of dissonance. It still have power to be used with verbs with aspect, progression, whatever you want. It's not about that. It is about the fact that you're using something that is not standard. Okay. It's not, if you analyze it mathematically to the limit that we can analyze it, with linguistics, it's still functioning its purposes, but it's not the morpheme that the government picked, in a way. Society picked, culture picked, literary, you name it. All right. So then we get the regulated form, and regulus means rule, right? Regis, the king, regulated. And it becomes prestigious. It becomes literary. It becomes biblical. I mean, vos is only used in the Bible. And everything else is informal. And I hate the word informal because it implies that it doesn't have form. And it's not true, because I can give you as many forms as you want in terms of linguistic structures. Like I said, in terms of abstractions, and the logic of linguistics, it's all there. It serves the same power. It's just that it's not the one that people want. So the prestigious form is not better than the informal, because informal implies it doesn't have form, and it's not true. It is just more powerful. So we're not talking about language here. We're talking about power. We're talking about what Foucault Foucault is beautiful when he talks about power relations in society. So let's look at some power relations here. Well, you got all these ones, right? You got the judges, you got laws, you got the police, you got it all. But then the last three are amazing. Schools, mental institutions, and prisons. And if you want to know more about it, you can check this book, Surveiller et Punir, which is Vigiar et Punir, Discipline and Punish. And this book is, oh my God, man, it opens your mind because it's like, well, like I said, I'm not claiming these things to be true. Okay. I don't really want to chase truth. I want to chase thought, systems of thought, and how these thinking processes affect society. All right. So, schools, mental institutions, prisons. I mean, the prison works in a way as the hospital of the delinquent and as the workshop of the delinquent. So it works in a way as a mental institution and as a school because you want to reform that person. You want to put that person back in society, right? By teaching that person. So Foucault does it beautifully, and he really delves into the world of incarceration and mental institutions and even schools. And we don't think the school is similar to the penal or the prison system, and it's got a lot of similarities, you know. Anyhow, like I said, it is a talk about language, but then it is a talk about how language is used in society. And if it's used, it's the most powerful cognitive system out there. It is used for these two types of power. So back then, you know, in the medieval times or in ancient history, the sovereign power, the physical punishment was much more used. But today you have a much better power system that you can use. And this power system is called by Foucault the disciplinary power, which is surveillance. So this type of power, I get up and I go to school and I take the subway and I do all the things that I'm supposed to do without nobody being right on my neck here, like, oh man, do this, do that. No one needs to do that stuff. Okay. I can do it, no problem. You know, so that's the power of the imaginary leash, as you can see with the dog there. It's just we by thinking about the imaginary leash, we are already under its grasp, all right, under its lock. So how and then Foucault uses the word discipline in terms of like psychology, the discipline of psychology, sociology, the discipline of sociology, grammar, rhetoric, logic. They're all systems that are disciplines in order for us to have this because it's all about control and power. And then it's like I said, it's totally okay because it can be used beautifully. But like I said, it has to be analyzed because when it's analyzed, it opens people's minds. And then you might ask me, let me look at the time here, okay? And then you might ask me, how can something so innocuous, such as language teaching or language use, be detrimental to other human beings? Well, it doesn't have to be as long as it is not about control. All right. So it is, if it's a contract, if I tell my student, hey, I'm going to teach you the English language, the Portuguese language, but this is a standard form and you give the person the right to know. So knowledge in terms of like, okay, this is not any better than the other one. This has been picked because the government has to pick one, whatever. But we got to be careful. We have to analyze things. We have to be aware. That's the word. It's linguistic awareness. Then if you do all these things, then I'm like, okay, good. Because now we have the contract where we already know. And then the student can be like, I don't care. The student can be, I'm okay with standard English, man, all the way. I'm part of the Matrix. It's like if you've seen the Matrix, that character called Cypher. I think his name was Cypher. He grabs the steak with the fork and he says, wow, I know that the steak doesn't exist. I know that it's all in my head, but I pick the steak any day over whatever Neo presented him. So he chose, but it was willingly, it was conscious to tag along. And I'm totally okay with that because he had the option to choose. But when you as a teacher, when you go to the university, nobody tells you that, then I have a problem with that. I'm starting to sound like Jordan Peterson. then I have a problem with that. If you go to Jordan, he talks a little bit like that, like, sorry, Jordan Peterson's great, by the way. Either way, we have a responsibility, okay? And we have to have this contract. We have to tell people the real thing. And most universities are not going to tell you that. And most jobs are not going to tell you that. Nobody's going to talk about it because it's a given. It's just granted. Why are you going to talk about it? It's like brushing your teeth. You just go ahead and brush your teeth. No, you can think about the action. You have a brain, for Christ's sakes. Just use it. Anyway, what can we do to fix it? If it requires any fixing, just give people linguistic awareness. It's exactly what I'm trying to do here, because I'm assuming that you are a language admirer, a language lover, a language connoisseur, whatever fancy schmancy word you want to use. Even if you're not, even if you're a language hater, you're still a promoter if you are teaching that. So you should be aware. You should just be aware that it's not any better. And you have to treat it in a different way. Because when you know that it's not any better, when you know that RP, that whatever is a system, you treat it as a game. You treat it as a game. It's your choice to play the game now, because it's been unveiled. So if it's a game, let's compare it to chess in a way. Well, in chess, it's the domino effect. I just need some rules. And from those rules, the world just opens up. It's beautiful, right? Simple rules. Follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, it ain't chess. I'm okay with that. It's the same thing with language. So if the knight moves in an L-shaped, if you go 2 squares vertically and then 1 square horizontally, or if you go 2 squares horizontally, 1 square vertically, it is a rule. If you don't do it, it's not chess. Okay, so it's the same with English, standard English. Do it like so. If you don't do it, it's not standard. It doesn't mean it's just a different game. Okay, it's a different relationship, and people are creative. People feel the need to create. It's just implicit, tacit. We want to change things. We want to save calories. We want to improvise. So that's why language changes so much. And then it becomes these different games, but it's all about the system. That's the beautiful, beautiful word. And there's a fancy Greek word to say, to talk about the principles of anything. It's called axiom. And one of the most perfect axiomatic systems that we have as human beings is mathematics. Mathematics is probably as close to perfection as we can get in terms of an axiomatic system that's got mostly proven stuff, but then it's got some axioms in the way, to sound like Godfather. It's got axioms that you cannot prove. Like Euclid tried it, and I'm going to give you a simple example with the parallel lines. With parallel lines, if it's not in 2 dimensions, it doesn't apply anymore. So the axioms, you have to treat Euclidean geometry in terms of 2 dimensions, because if it becomes 3 dimensions with spherical stuff, then it has to be hyperbolic geometry. It's a different game. You have to come up with new axioms. And that's the same thing. And then what is the coolest thing about language? It's because language is the ultimate axiomatic system. Because all of the other ones, even a perfect system like math, is still, or near perfect, it's still, what's the word? Ancillary, to use a fancy word, like secondary to language. It's going to use human language to process, to create, to do all these things. So that's why language is so powerful, and it's hard to dissociate language from this stuff, because it's so natural, man. It's so that it becomes this thing that nobody wants to talk about, or just taking it for granted. Anyhow, looking at the time, we're doing fine. Got 15 more minutes, and then I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna be open for questions, for all that you want to comment on. Feel free to make any comments, and then I'm gonna be more than glad to reply and to try and discuss. And hey, I'm not trying to be the know-it-all here. All right. What I'm truly trying to be here is just the mediator. Like I'm putting the spark there with not trying to generate the wildfire literally, but generating the wildfire in your mind in a way that you got to start posing questions to yourself. Hey, as a teacher, how am I doing? Has anybody ever talked to me about that? No. Do I agree with that? No, I don't. I don't think this guy's right. I think language has better forms. And then I'm going to say, okay, why do you think like that? And try to come up with a logical, argumentative structure, and then just, man, research away. It's not a problem. But I prefer to see myself as a mediator. So the guide on the side. It's like I cannot really decide certain things, but we can discuss them. So it's not about the sage on the stage. It's about the guide on the side. It's the facilitator for us to think, and that's beautifully put by Paulo Freire. And I mean, you cannot, you don't have to agree with everybody's ideas. All right, the ideas are just there for you to grab, for you to use it in the best way that you can. So we're trying to do the right thing, even if the right is gray and it's not black and white. Most people wanted everything to be binary. It's not about binary. It's about all the shades of gray that you have, and it's much more than 50. So be more. You're more, because you yourself, you are a language student, right? You, like I said, you admire, you like to read books, you like all that stuff. But be more than a language student. Be a thought student. Okay, like I said, language is king. It is the ultimate system of thought. All of the other systems of thought rely on language. So, if you like it, dedicate your time to knowing more about it. But like I said, if it's still within the game, it still has to abide by those rules. And it's the domino effect. So you got to be able to go a notch further, right? You got to go to the big bang, but you go just maybe a thousandth of a second prior. Try to get there. It's fun. Anyhow, we got to the point where I promised you that I was going to talk about the verb to be, because it's one of my favorite verbs. So, cliffhanger, we talked about it in the beginning. I hope that you've stayed till this moment where I'm going to unveil the rationale. I'm kidding. This is just, like I said, fodder for future exercises that you might use. All right. So when we look at standard English, the verb to be is right there. I am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, you are, they are. An exercise that we can do is try to go back in time. But then when we go back in time to the language that was called Old English, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, man, what is that? It's got nothing to do with English the way it is now. Because when you go back to Old English was the language spoken in what we now call England, but it was Kent, Mercia, Northumbria, Wessex, all those regions there. Right after the decline and the fall of the Roman Empire, till maybe 680, the 700s there. If you've been watching Vikings begins right after that with the Norse invasions, in the north of England. Either way, when you look at Old English, it's like, oh my God, I don't really have many clues. The first thing that you notice is the fact that it's a different type of language, because with English, in a fancy way, you call it an analytical language because you're using pronouns. But with Old English, because of the endings, it's a synthetic language, in a way that you just look at the word and if it's I, if it's you. Same thing applies to Latin and to French and Portuguese to a certain extent. French, not so much. But either way, something else that you can do to try and study how language has changed is by comparing to sister languages, right? So we're going to do it here, and we're going to try and start with some investigation. So this is inquiry-based learning, a way that we're investigating. We have hypotheses. We're going to think about them. So when I look at Dutch, Swedish, and German, the first thing that pops up is the fact that Swedish has ar everywhere. So the conjugation is the same for everyone. It's ar. And then when you think about ar, it's like, oh my God, English has got R there too, for we, you, and they. What's even weird that R is not part of Dutch and German. So for those persons, English has a similarity with a Nordic language, meaning that the Vikings probably had an influence in English back, in the Viking invasions. This is we're supposing, we're assuming, we're thinking. We don't know if it's true, okay? But it is a train of thought for us to consider. And then we notice that the R is not part of Dutch and German. We notice that it's part of Swedish, and English has it. But then we notice that German, and sorry about the pronunciations that are not perfect. I'm sorry, but Dutch, I mean, the writing doesn't help you, but it's something like for the plural there, they, they, jullie, they. When you say they, you're like, oh, they sounds like they, in a way. They, the third person plural there sounds like they. So it's similar. And then the zijn looks similar to the sind from German. So, and then in Old English, you do have that. Oh, okay, that's cool. And then you have the B, B, bis, the B ones, the roots that you have in Dutch and German, like ich ben and ich bin, but you don't have with the I am. So something happened there where I am is completely different. Either way, we have something, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is the third person singular, where you have is. And is interesting because it sounds like French third person, doesn't it? And then if you think about it, if you analyze the history, the Franks, not the French, but the Franks, the tribal populations that occupied France many centuries ago, they did so with some Germans. And then, you call it the Frankish people. And the Frankish people might have influenced the Anglo-Normans, who later conquered England in 1066 with William conquering England. And then it might be that it popped the he is, she is. You see that in Dutch too. Hij is, zij is, het is. It's very similar. And you have that in German, but you don't have that in Swedish, right? So it might be related to the Frankish kingdoms from the past, the fact that France and Germany were very close due to Charlemagne, right? The Carolingian Empire, all that stuff. So, I mean, when you look at language and you analyze the history, you can find ways to find out why the verb to be is so irregular. But what's most impressive, the main takeaway, is that the verb to be was a collaborative effort. It was not an effort of just the Mercians or the West Saxons or the Angles. It was an effort that even the Nordic, the Vikings contributed. So it's beautiful that humans can collaborate in various ways and create something so beautiful as that verb system. It was democratic in a way because, it came from, obviously, I'm abstracting from the conquerors and everything, but it was whenever you had to come up with a standard variety, you tried to, use whatever was used here and there. So it is a collaborative effort. And it is, whenever we look at the past, whenever we try to evaluate the past, it's going to be hazy and it's going to be biased and it's going to be perspectival and relative to the documents that you're researching. Okay. So it's not going to be 100%. And that's totally okay, because the exercise and whatever you're trying to bring about is what really matters. All right. So we got to the point where I'm going to show you my references for the talk, and I'm going to open for questions. If there were any issues that I maybe just swooshed by way too fast, I can go back, okay, and we can check. But let's quickly talk about the references. So these are the books that I used mostly to come up with the ideas. All right. Obviously, some of these ideas are filtered by my brain, but it wouldn't have been possible to bring that about if it wasn't for, or if it weren't, whatever floats your boat. See, I'm part of the matrix. If it wasn't for these books. All right. So John McWhorter, this dude right there, man. These anything by John McWhorter. If you want to know more about languages, that guy is the man. All right. Steven Pinker, if you want to know more about psychology, neuroscience, and linguistics, this guy is also he's got great books about it. And then, like I said, Foucault and Paulo Freire to understand the relations between like critical pedagogy, the way power works in society, and Chomsky in terms of also political relations and linguistic features. And Jessica Kuhn, she's a professor at McGill, and she was the consultant for the movie Arrival, trying to come up with ideas for an alien language. So it's a beautiful book that talks about language invention, and it's got some really important insights into the matter of ideas and cognitive power and everything else. So, these were the main references. And I'm a huge fan of these books here. I would recommend them in a heartbeat anytime. All right. So now going back um to y'all here. Yeah, like someone is talking about exams, and I'm like, okay, I'm totally okay with exams. They analyze proficiency. That's fine. But like I said, it's a closed system based on those axioms. So everyone has to understand that whenever you're playing the exam game, it's still a game. It doesn't prove that it proves that you're proficient according to those standards. So I had to do it because of society. Like I said, we're part of society, and no one is telling you not to do it. We're just telling you to think about it, and by incrementally, small changes, man, here and there, you can go really far. If you start walking one step at a time, all of a sudden you're really far. So that's the power of thinking. All right. Obviously, it generates controversy, and like I said, it's just human nature. It's politics. Politics is just the interaction of minds. It's ideas, and just have to try and come up with with argumentative ways. You see, see what I did there? It's automatic. But like I said, we got to think about these things. We got to think about why it is the way it is, and if somehow we can slowly but surely change it in a way, because that's the thing. It's not that it's wrong, but it's got to be good for most people. That's the thing. Everyone has to be in, and everyone has to be like, hey, I'm actually taking advantage of this stuff here. It's beneficial, because if it's only beneficial to 1%, it's not beneficial at all. All right. So that's the thing. When we think about it, we find ways to have more people participating and benefiting from all these aspects. Okay. It's got to be good. It's got to be the contract where everyone is gaining. Okay. So, well, it looks like some people, many of my students are already comfortable with the language learning through a way they can make their ideas understandable. That's fine. Like I said, if your students are aware that they're conveying their ideas through a lens that they're fine with, that's perfect. Like I said, whenever they watch Netflix and they see informal aspects of other dialects, as long as they're not holding the biases, then I'm okay with that. As long as they're not treating government language as better language, because there's no such thing. Okay. How can a teacher be bold and creative with the language when she must follow heavy schedules in English courses, lesson plans counted by the minutes? That's the thing. You're not going to change the matrix. I work for a publisher. Everybody works here. We're not saying this is not how things change. Like I said, things change incrementally by the demands of society. Okay. So you have, like I said, you have a role, and the role is for you to teach standard English. That's fine. But just make sure that you also promote linguistic awareness. That's all, because that way you're going to be holding less biases. You yourself are going to be the mediator, and you're not just being, think of a metaphor of the shepherd. Okay. Think of like government as being the shepherd, and you're just the flock of sheep. Okay. We're all sheep. That's fine. But we have to find ways that the other sheep are just, everybody is just, okay, we're okay with the game. And we're thinking about the whole aspect, because this is the only way that we can incrementally change things. Okay. Every other way is going to use sovereign power, is going to use abuse. We're not talking about abuse here. We're talking about just thinking, cognition. All right. And like I said, if you just say, "Oh, we're going to break the system just out of spite," you're using the same power against, so you're not doing the right thing. Think about like Rage Against the Machine in a way. I know they're using the system to talk about other things. They're not perfect, but I'm just giving you an example of, you should think, oh, but Rage Against the Machine is just a bunch of hypocrites because they're part of the system. No, they're part of the system, and they're trying to change the system within the system. It's like Inception. It's like Inception. All right. Perfect. I think that was the main thing. Yeah, that's the thing. NC translations. That's it. It's basically being the mediator, providing fodder for various thoughts, and people who think different or differently. The adverb is changing. We're facing many changes in language, but anyhow, if you think differently or different, whatever floats your boat, you are providing the opportunities. You're setting the stage, right? Setting the stage. But that doesn't hold you, it doesn't stop you, rather, to talk about the stage itself. That's the thing. All right. If you can be understood, that's what really matters. Yes, that's the thing. Ultimately, we want people to have no biases. We want people to respect. So whenever I hear something different, I'm okay with that. And that's what babies do. When babies are just interacting with each other, they don't care. We know that society is much different, but if we are aware, chances are that the more people that are aware, the better, and the more beautiful the future can be. So we got to be positive, and we got to use a lot of love. It sounds cheesy, but it is true. We got to use a lot of love and empathy towards other people, whatever ways they think. Everyone is entitled to ponder and to wander, but we have to have the right to know. And knowledge is that it's unveiling. It's trying to present new information in various ways. Okay, cool. So I think that was it. Noam Chomsky Foucault, that rings a bell. We'll read it. Thank you, Jorge Delgado, Georgia Delgado. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone who's been here and who took the time to listen to this. And hopefully that will, increment a small change. It will just affect slowly but surely. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us this afternoon. Just remember, your certificate link is already available on the video description. Thanks a lot, Alex, for joining us today. It was amazing. And I want to invite everybody for our next lecture, which will be held in Portuguese by Márcia Garcia from Play to Learn. She will talk about recursos visuais, internet e celular é tudo que você precisa para ensinar. I hope to see everybody there. And thanks again, Alex.
Uh,
And hope to
thank,
hear
thank,
from you soon.
yeah, thank you, Barbara. And just my Instagram, Tamulis, and my email. Sorry, I forgot to share that. If you want to
No,
get in
no
touch with
problem.
me, if you want to get in touch, if you need the presentation, I can send you the PDF. I'll be more than happy to do so. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.